Story 1. By a house on Mulberry Lane, Karen Stokes had always imagined that moving meant starting over. After the divorce, after the fights that ended in slammed doors and bitter silences, she wanted normal. She wanted peace. So, when she found the little house on Mulberry Lane, white siding, black shutters, a yard big enough for a swing set, she thought maybe, just maybe, she could have it. The house was perfect in that suburban way. Every morning, sunlight poured through wide windows and spilled across polished wooden floors. The neighbors waved from behind hedges, trimmed like squares, and the smell of baking bread sometimes drifted from next door. It took only a week for Karen to realize that the mirrors in this house were wrong. At first, it was subtle. A glance in the hallway mirror, and her reflection lingered a moment too long before she blinked. She shook it off, as tiredness moving was exhausting, but then she noticed little things. A hand reaching for a doorknob that she hadn't moved, a shadow falling where none should have been. The bathroom mirror was the worst. She would brush her teeth in the morning and catch glimpses of herself, her hair tangled, her eyes red not from lack of sleep, but from some hollow fear. Once, she even swore she saw her daughter, Lily, standing behind her, even though Lily was at school. "Mom," Lily's voice had made her jump. She spun around, but the girl wasn't there. Karen laughed nervously. "Gotcha," she told herself. But the mirrors weren't just showing things differently, they were showing things that hadn't happened yet. It started small. Okay, she saw herself dropping a mug, the ceramic shattering on the floor before it happened. She saw a note on the Phrygia note she hadn't written that warned her of something coming. Each reflection felt like a whisper, a subtle pull at the edges of her mind, nudging her to believe in something she couldn't understand. She tried to leave the house. Every Saturday, she'd make a plan to go out, maybe meet a friend, or take Lily to the park. And every Saturday, she found herself stopping in front of the hallway mirror. She couldn't look away. Something inside those silver surfaces held her in place. Then came the voices. At first, it was just murmurs, faint, like the sound of people talking on another street. But soon, the whispers came from the mirrors themselves. "Karen," they called. "Watch," they said. "See what's coming?" Karen tried to ignore them, but the more she tried, the louder they became. They spoke of fear, of pain, of things that might happen to her daughter if she wasn't careful. The house, she realized, was feeding on her fear. And fear, in Mulberry Lane, had a taste she had never known. The worst night was the one she could hardly remember without trembling. Lily was asleep, her small chest rising and falling under the covers. Karen had gone into the living room to read some attempt to reclaim normalcy, but the mirror on the mantelpiece caught her eye. Her reflection wasn't alone. There was a figure standing behind her, tall and shadowed, with eyes that seemed to burn through the glass. Karen spun around. Nothing. The reflection smiled. Her own lips weren't smiling. She ran to Lily's room. The girl slept peacefully, unaware of the terror. Karen wanted to call the police, wanted to scream at someone, anyone, that her house was alive. A kid, but how do you explain something like that? "There's a shadow in my mirror that smiles at me." So she stayed silent. She didn't sleep. She watched. She documented. She tried to understand. The days passed. The mirrors began showing not just the house itself, but her own fears. Her divorce replayed with darker, crueler endings. Friends she didn't trust. Neighbors who whispered behind her back. Once, she saw herself lying on the floor of the kitchen, blood pooling beneath her. She told herself it wasn't real, just reflection, just fear, but the panic in her chest felt very, very real. Then came the letter. It appeared one morning, slipped under the front door. The envelope was plain, but the words inside were in her handwriting. Only she hadn't written them. "Don't ignore the mirrors. They know you. They are hungry. You are next." Karen dropped the paper. Her knees buckled. She thought about leaving, running away, but she knew the house wouldn't let her. It had her trapped in ways she didn't understand. The mirrors, she realized, weren't just reflecting. They were showing her potential futures, each one darker than the last. And the more she looked, the more the house shaped reality to match what it showed. Every glance was a small sacrifice. Every fear fed the walls, the floors, the very air she breathed. She tried covering them, sheets, blankets, newspaper, anything to block the glass. But even when she couldn't see, she felt the mirrors watching. The whispers didn't stop. Karen's breaking point came on a stormy night. Lightning flashed through the windows, illuminating the house in stark, unnatural detail. Every mirror glowed with an inner light, and every reflection was moving independently. She saw herself screaming, saw Lily calling her name from inside the glass, and then the walls seemed to breathe. The fear was suffocating. Karen knew she couldn't stay. She grabbed Lily, threw her coat over her, and ran through the rain, past the neighbors' smiling faces, frozen in horror. Past a quiet street that now felt alien, until they reached her car. They didn't look back. Karen never returned. The house on Mulberry Lane remained, its windows dark, its mirrors empty, or so it seemed. The neighbors whispered about the strange new owner who moved in a year later, who never appeared during the day and rarely at night. And in the quiet, if you stand close enough, you can hear a soft murmur, like someone calling your name, just beyond the glass. Some nights, when Karen lay in a motel far from the house, she swore she could see reflections in mirrors where they shouldn't exist. A shadow moving behind her, a smile that wasn't hers. And she knew, deep down, that Mulberry Lane had never let her go. The house feeds on fear, and fear, as Karen now understood, is patient. The oak tree had been there longer than anyone could remember. Its trunk was wide enough that 4 grown men couldn't wrap their arms around it, and its branches stretched high, like skeletal arms scraping the sky. In the small main town of Haven's End, everyone knew the oak, but no one went near it after dark. Stood at the edge of Miller's Field, just past the old rail tracks. During the day, it looked ordinary enough, a relic of another century, with leaves that shivered in the wind and bark pocked with age. But at night, that was when the whispers began. It started with the children. First, it was little Tommy Wren, 7 years old, who vanished one warm summer evening. Terrence found his bike lying in the grass near the oak, the front wheel bent, the handlebars twisted like something heavy had passed through it. But Tommy was gone. A week later, the McAllister twins, Hannah and Eli, disappeared. They had been playing near the tree, dared each other to see who could climb the highest. By midnight, the town was searching, but all they found were 2 small backpacks and tiny footprints leading to the base of the oak, then stopping. The townsfolk began to whisper among themselves. The sheriff, a broad-shouldered man named Bill Crawford, called it coincidence at first. "Kids wander off all the time," he said at the town meeting, but his voice trembled just a little. It didn't take long before more children reported hearing something in the wind, whispers, calling their names. "Come play, come sit, don't be afraid." No one knew where the voices came from. The oak tree didn't move except when the wind blew. Its leaves rustled in the faintest breeze, but some nights, even when the air was still, the whispers came. Sophie Larkin was 13 when she first heard it. She had stayed late at the library, finishing a book on Maine legends, and was walking home along the field. The moon was a thin silver sliver above, and the shadows from the oak stretched long and cold. "Sophie," she froze. Her heart skipped a beat. The whisper came again, softer this time, like someone breathing directly in her ear. "Sophie, come closer." Her feet moved before her mind could catch up. She found herself walking toward the tree, her shoes crunching in the gravel, the whispers wrapping around her thoughts, pulling her forward. She remembered her father's warning, "Don't go near the oak at night." But the voice was insistent, sweet, almost like it knew her. A sudden gust of wind shook the branches, and Sophie's hair whipped across her face. She blinked and saw something she couldn't explain. Shadows moved inside the tree, twisting and curling like smoke, forming shapes that looked like children, like her friends, laughing and reaching for her. Sophie bolted. Her lungs burned, and she didn't stop running until she reached the safety of her porch. But when she looked back, the oak seemed ordinary again, silent, and the shadows were gone. She told no one. No one would believe her. Over the next month, the disappearances continued. Parents refused to let their children out after dark. The town installed lights in the field, hoping the brightness would chase whatever lurked there away. It didn't. The whispers only got louder, more persuasive, and sometimes children would sneak out, drawn by the voices. Old Mrs. Hargrove, who had lived in Haven's End her entire life, claimed the oak was cursed. "It's feeding," she said at the grocery store, voice trembling, "feeding on their curiosity, their fear. It's alive. Mark my words. You leave it alone, or it will take everything you love." No one listened. They were too afraid. And afraid people are easy to fool. One evening, Sheriff Crawford decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight and a revolver, he trudged across the field. The wind had died down, and the air was unnaturally still. The flashlight cut a circle of yellow in the darkness, but the oak itself seemed to absorb the light, its shadow deeper than the night. "Hello," he called. The whispers came immediately, low, almost sibilant, curling around his ears. "Bill, come closer. Don't be afraid." He froze. It was his daughter's voice, his little Emily, 6 years old. She had been asleep at home, safe in her bed, hadn't she? His knees buckled, his flashlight swinging wildly as the trees seemed to shift before his eyes. The bark melted into shapes' faces, dozens of them, pale and smiling, some familiar, some twisted. Bill fired his gun. The sound cracked through the night, echoing against the hills, but when the smoke cleared, there was nothing. Just the oak, ordinary again, and the whispers had stopped. For a night. The next morning, Emily was gone. Her bed was empty. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing. Only the echo of that whisper, sweet and patient, lingering in the corners of the sheriff's mind. Desperation gripped Haven's End. Parents took turns watching their children, sleeping near their beds, holding them close. But the oak was patient. It had time. Children have a curiosity that no amount of fear can erase. One night, Sophie, braver than most, crept out again. She couldn't help herself. The oak called her. She approached slowly, heart pounding, whispering a silent promise to herself. "I will not go inside. I will not go inside." The shadows began to swirl around the base of the trunk, small figures that mimicked her movements, beckoning. She felt the tug in her chest, a cold pull, stronger than gravity. At the end she heard it, clearly, not a whisper, but a voice, low and commanding. "Step closer, Sophie. Stay, forever." She ran. She didn't stop until she hit the streetlights near the town square. But when she looked back, the oak was still, silent, its branches swaying in the wind. Yet she could feel it watching, waiting, biding its time. The town tried everything, cutting away dead branches, surrounding the field with fences, holding prayer circles. Nothing worked. The oak would not be defeated. It fed on fear, on innocence, on the irresistible pull of curiosity. And every now and then, on nights when the moon was thin and silver, children would vanish again. The whisper of their names, faint and soft, could be heard carried on the wind. Haven's End would never forget the oak. Some days, parents would glance at it from their windows, terrified to approach. Children would dare each other to peek from behind corners, hearts racing. The tree waited, patient, hungry, eternal. And those who disappeared, well, some say their voices now joined the whispers, calling from the shadows, enticing the next generation to come too close. Because in Haven's End, the oak is not just a tree. It is something older, something alive, and it will always want more. Jake Mercer had been spinning records at WREN 94.7 for 5 years, mostly keeping late-night listeners company with old rock tracks and bad jokes. The graveyard shift wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. And there was something comforting about the quiet hum of the studio at 2 a.m. The hum of fluorescent lights, the occasional hiss of the vinyl, the soft whir of the mixer. It was on a Tuesday night, just past midnight, when the first call came. "Ren, you there?" A voice said over the line, thin, raspy, almost like it had been dragged from a grave. "Sure," Jake said, checking the caller ID. "Who's this?" "Don't you remember me, Jake?" The voice whispered. "It's me, your dad." Jake laughed nervously. "Very funny. Wrong number." "I'm not wrong. Not anymore," the voice said. The line went dead. Jake shook his head and went back to the music. Weird prank calls weren't unusual at this hour, and he had a reputation for ignoring them. But the next night, the calls came again. This time, the voice was calmer, measured, knowing. "Jake, Marlene Firth just broke her mother's heart. She'll regret it tomorrow night." Jake froze. Marlene Firth. He glanced at the station logs. She was one of the regular late-night listeners. He remembered her call from 2 nights ago, a sweet voice talking about her cat. "Who is this?" he asked, voice tighter than usual. "You'll see," the caller said. "I know things you don't want to hear." The next day, Marlene Firth was found dead, her cat hissing beside her, the kitchen floor slick with blood. No one knew how it happened. Jake's stomach turned. The calls didn't stop. Each night, the man on the line told him about someone, listeners, neighbors, even co-workers. Every prediction came true. The deaths were always gruesome, always precise, and always, without fail, personal. Jake tried to ignore it, tried to change his schedule. Damn, but the voice followed him. Sometimes it called during the day. Sometimes he would pick up the phone at home and hear nothing but the static hum of the line before the whisper returned. "Your turn is coming, Jake. Soon." He confided in no one. Who would believe him? A radio DJ being stalked by death? It sounded insane. And maybe it was, but the evidence was real enough. The bodies, the calls, and his own growing fear gnawing at the edges of his mind. One night, desperate, he decided to confront the caller. "I'm done with this," Jake said into the mic during the broadcast. "Whoever you are, come on. Show yourself. Stop hiding behind the phone." A pause, then a laugh. Cold, empty. "I'm not hiding," the voice said. "I'm right here. Always have been. Always will be. You think the airwaves are just sound? Big doors? Windows? I walk through them as I please." Jake's fingers trembled on the controls. "What do you want from me?" "To play," the voice said simply. "To watch. To make sure the ending is perfect." Jake's blood ran cold. It wasn't just a man. It wasn't a prank. Whatever this was, it was something older, smarter, and hungrier than him. The next call came faster than he expected. "Turn off the mic, Jake. Walk away. Or tonight, it's you." He didn't know how to walk away. The station was under contract. He had bills. But worse, he couldn't stop thinking about the calls. Couldn't sleep. Every shadow in his apartment seemed to stretch toward him. Every reflection in the window seemed to move independently, waiting. Then he realized something. The predictions weren't random. They were tied to fear. The more frightened a listener was, the more precise the call. Fear made the caller stronger. Jake tried to test it. He invited a co-worker to call the station, pretending to be terrified. The voice didn't respond. It only reacted to those truly afraid. And that meant came. He was already on the list. One night, the studio was empty, except for Jake. The phone rang. His hand hovered, heart hammering. He picked it up. "Jake," the voice said. "Tonight, it ends. Are you ready?" He swallowed. "What do you want from me?" "See you live, finally." to hear your fear when you understand that the choice was never yours. Jake slammed the receiver down. The lights flickered. The mixer whirred and hissed. The vinyl skipped, repeating the same phrase over and over. Jake, you're dead. The shadows in the studio grew long. The equipment hummed unnaturally, like something alive beneath the plastic and metal. The air became thick, electric, and he could feel it's something moving toward him. Using the static, the airwaves, the very electricity to cross from one world into his. He ran for the door, but it slammed shut on its own. The phone rang again. He picked up, trembling. I told you, the voice said. I told you. And now, the studio went black. Jake felt a hand, cold and firm, brush against his shoulder. He spun, but saw nothing. The music skipped into distorted fragments. The voices of past victims whispered through the speakers. Jake, Jake, come, join us. Panic took him. He tried to fight, but the shadows moved faster than his hands. The voice was inside him now, inside every sound, every pulse of light, every beat of his heart. And then, silence. When the station manager arrived the next morning, he found the equipment powered down. The lights were off, and Jake Mercer was gone. No note, no signs of struggle, just the faint echo of a voice lingering in the speakers, repeating over and over, faint but clear. The broadcast never ends. From that night on, Ren 94.7 stayed silent past midnight. Sometimes, locals claimed to hear the old late-night show, faint static playing over the airwaves, and if you called the number that used to ring through to the studio, sometimes, just sometimes, a whisper would answer. Hello, Jake. And somewhere out there, the voice waited, feeding, patient, eternal. The lake had been abandoned for decades. Locals called it Hollow Lake, and most of the older residents avoided it entirely, whispering about drownings, disappearances, and strange lights beneath the surface. But to the teenagers of Milltown, it was the perfect place for dares, secrets, and weekend thrills. It was the middle of August when Liam, Jesse, Max, and Tori decided to explore. School was out, the sun hung low in the sky, and the lake glimmered like a dark mirror, reflecting the orange and pink streaks of sunset. Do you really think it's haunted? Kicking a loose rock along the shore. Haunted, cursed, or just creepy, Max said, shrugging. It doesn't matter, we're going in. Liam smiled nervously. He had heard the stories, of course, the ones about people disappearing and water bubbling, as if something alive stirred below. But fear always felt smaller when friends laughed beside you. The water was cold, colder than any lake should be in the middle of summer. They waded in, ankles sinking into the muddy floor, the bottom slick and uneven. Tori held a flashlight, shining it across the water. That's weird, she said. Look, the light revealed movement just beneath the surface, something humanoid, slender, pale, and with eyes that reflected the flashlight in the same way a cat's do at night. It didn't swim like a fish. It glided, deliberate and silent. It's probably just a deer, Max joked, but his voice trembled. The creatures didn't stay hidden long. One rose halfway out of the water, its arms unnaturally long, fingers tipped with black claws. It stared at them, mouth opening and closing like it was trying to speak a scream. Liam's stomach churned. He should go, but curiosity and a strange pull he couldn't explain kept them there. The water rippled unnaturally, as if the lake itself was alive, watching. Tori gasped. Something touched her ankle. She screamed, pulling back. Nothing was there, but the water around her swirled like it had a mind of its own. That night, they didn't return to town immediately. They camped by the shore, huddled around a small fire, trying to make sense of what they saw. But even in the warmth of the flames, Liam felt it the pull, the whispering hum, a faint vibration through the ground beneath their feet. And that's when Max disappeared. It started small. Key complained of cramps, wading too deep, saying he felt something tugging at him. Liam and Jesse ran to help, but the water erupted with unnatural bubbles. Max screamed, a sound cut short by the sucking noise of the lake. Within seconds, he was gone. The water stilled, leaving only ripples that glinted in the firelight. His backpack floated to the shore. His shoes were gone. Jesse screamed, but there was nothing they could do. Tori and Liam clung together, shivering as the lake seemed to mock them, sending small waves lapping at their legs. The next morning, they returned with the sheriff. Hollow Lake looked calm, peaceful, almost inviting, but Liam noticed something chilling. Scratches on the wooden dock, long and deep, as if something had climbed out. Tor tried to. "No one's been here for years," the sheriff said, frowning. "This lake's bottom is mostly mud and rocks. What could have caused that?" They didn't answer. They couldn't, because they had seen what lived beneath the water. That night, Liam couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Max's face in the water, pale eyes wide, mouth open, as if he was screaming from the depths. And then came the messages. First, etched into the fogged-up window of his bedroom, "Join us." Then on the bathroom mirror, "The water waits." By morning, scratches appeared on his front door, like long fingernails scraping wood. No one had been near. Tori called him in a panic. "Jessie's gone," she whispered. "I swear I saw her by the lake, and then nothing. The water. It took her." Liam wanted to run, wanted to hide, but he knew hiding wouldn't help. The lake was alive. It was hungry, and it had a pull that could not be resisted. That night, he went back. He couldn't stop himself. The moon shone bright on the black water, reflecting like glass. He could see ripples forming where the others had disappeared, small circles expanding endlessly. The water opened slowly, almost politely, revealing shapes beneath. The creatures rose humanoid, pale, with water dripping from limbs too long and fingers too sharp. Eyes glowed with cold light, fixed on him. He stumbled back, but the ground beneath him felt sticky, pulling him forward. "Liam," a voice hissed, wet and bubbling. "Come, join us." He tried to run. His legs flailed, sinking into the muddy shore. The water surged, taller than waves should be, wrapping around him like a hand. He felt cold teeth graze his ankle, and he screamed. In that instant, he understood. The lake didn't just hold water, held memory, hunger, and patience. The creatures beneath weren't just animals. They were ancient, hungry, and bound to the water. Every soul it claimed became part of it, feeding it, strengthening it, whispering for the next victim. Liam's scream echoed through the night, mingling with the whispers of Max, Jesse, and Tori, and then silence. The next morning, the sheriff found Liam's shoes on the shore. His flashlight lay half submerged. There was no sign of the boy. Only ripples disturbed the glassy surface of Hollow Lake. Weeks passed. Hollow Lake remained calm. The town whispered about the teenagers, marking them as cautionary tales. The lake waited, always, patiently, late at night when the moon is low and silver. Some say you can hear it, the faintest whispers rising from the black water. "Come, come, join us." And if you listen too closely, some claim you can see hands reaching up from the depths, pale and wet, beckoning, hungry, waiting. Hollow Lake never forgets, and it is never satisfied. Simon Hale had never believed in luck. Or maybe he had, and life had been cruel enough to strip it away. A struggling writer living in a cramped apartment in Portland, he barely made enough to cover rent, let alone groceries. His stories went unread, tucked away in dusty folders, dismissed by publishers who said his work was unmarketable. So when he inherited the cabin, he thought it might be his chance to start over. The letter had been short and impersonal. "You are the sole heir of your uncle's property in the woods of Vermont. The cabin is yours. use it well. He arrived on a rainy Thursday, the sky low and gray, the trees bending under the wind. The cabin was small, quaint, and old, but solid. Its windows glistened with raindrops, and smoke curled lazily from the chimney of a neighbor's distant house. Inside, everything smelled of cedar and old paper. There was only one unusual feature: a single room painted a deep, almost unnatural red. The color was bright, overpowering, and unlike anything Simon had ever seen. His uncle had clearly been eccentric. At first, Simon laughed it off. Just paint, he thought. A little bright, but nothing to worry about. He set up his typewriter in the center of the room, facing a small window. Gay. That night, he began to write. His first story was simple, a short tale about a local man who met an untimely end in the woods. As he wrote, he felt a strange tension building in the room, like the air itself was charged. When he finished, he went to bed, dismissing the feeling as imagination. The next morning, he found the newspaper open on the counter. His story had come true. The man he wrote about had died in the woods overnight. Simon's stomach turned. It had to be coincidence, he told himself. Maybe there was a real man with the same name. Maybe the story inspired some tragic accident. But it didn't stop. Over the next week, Simon wrote again, carefully, cautiously, always testing the limits. He wrote about a thief getting caught in his own trap. That night, a local burglar was found dead, impaled on a homemade spike in a garage. Simon didn't sleep. The red room seemed to pulse. Every time he typed, it felt alive, watching, pressing him to write more, to create more. His reflection in the window was too pale, too sharp, and sometimes he thought he saw movement behind the red walls, shadows stretching where there should be none. Simon tried to ignore it. He wrote for hours, day after day, producing story after story. Each one came true. He tried writing small, harmless things, birds flying across the sky, a neighbor losing a hat, but even those had strange consequences. One bird got caught in a power line, electrocuted, in the hat. It was found in the middle of a road, crushed by a passing car. Fear began to seep into Simon's mind. The room demanded attention. The stories demanded action. And the red seemed to grow darker, more oppressive with each passing day. Then came the first real horror. He wrote a story about his best friend, Mark, surviving a car crash. But when he woke, Mark had been hit by a drunk driver the night before. Simon couldn't explain it. He hadn't known the crash would happen. He'd only written it in the morning, hours after Mark's accident. The room seemed to thrum with satisfaction, as though the story had anticipated reality, bending the world to its will. Simon stopped writing. He tried to leave the cabin to escape the red room, but the house itself seemed to resist. Every exit was blocked by shadows that weren't there before, by the wind howling against windows, by doors that would not open. It was trapped. Hunger gnawed at him. Sleeplessness clawed at his mind. The room pulsed with an almost physical heartbeat. And then, in the middle of the night, it spoke not in words, but in thoughts. Ideas forced themselves into his mind. Stories, images, deaths, violence, and each one felt irresistible. Simon tried to resist. He told himself he would not write another story. But by morning, he had written again, feverishly. This time, he wrote about his sister, Emily, trapped in a fire. He did not know why he chose that story. The words seemed to flow on their own. The next morning, the cabin across the woods was ablaze. Emily was unharmed, rescued by a neighbor, but she was shaken, crying, staring at him with questions he could not answer. "I didn't do this, Emily. I swear I didn't," he yelled. But the red room hummed behind him, almost laughing. Simon realized the truth. The room wasn't just a room, with a living thing, feeding off creation, and more importantly, fear. It demanded stories. It demanded blood. Kent, it would use him to get them. He tried to leave again, packing a bag, sprinting toward the car, but the shadows blocked the way. Trees shifted in impossible angles, the path bending back toward the cabin. Panic clawed at his chest. The red room had eyes. Simon was certain, and it was watching him, waiting. Days passed, tore, maybe hours. Time seemed meaningless in the red glow. Simon could not sleep. Every attempt to escape ended with the walls pressing closer, the color more vivid, alive. He tried destroying the typewriter, burning the paper, smashing the desk. Nothing worked. The room demanded stories, and stories it would have. Then came the final horror. Simon wrote a story about the room itself. He tried to trick it, to write himself free, to imprison the red walls in fiction. But the room, alive and hungry, read every word. Every twist, he thought, would outsmart it, only strengthened his power. Shadows deepened, stretching into him, pulling at his mind, whispering in voices of past victims. Write, kill, feed. The final line he wrote was trembling, tears smearing ink across the page. The red room always wins. That night, Simon disappeared. The neighbors later said the cabin was quiet, too quiet. Occasionally, they saw light flickering through the red windows, and sometimes, on still nights, they swore they heard typing, soft, insistent, relentless. No one dared enter. And the red room waits, patient, hungry, alive. It feeds on imagination, on fear, on the fragile lives of those who come too close. And the typewriter. It sits in the center of the room, waiting for the next writer, full assured, desperate enough to inherit its power, because the red room doesn't forgive. It doesn't forget. And it always wants more. The asylum had been abandoned for 30 years, but it was never empty. Locals called it Holleridge Asylum, tucked at the edge of town behind twisted pines and barbed wire. Children dared each other to peek through its broken windows. Hikers felt chills when passing the crumbling gates, and those who went inside, well, they never spoke the same way again. Ethan Marsh was a journalist, investigative, relentless, and stubbornly rational. Ghosts, he told himself, were stories, nothing more. Yet, when he read about Holleridge's history, the patients, the experimental treatments, the unexplained deaths, he felt the pull. It was a story worth the risk. He arrived on a gray, windy afternoon, the sky low and heavy. The asylum loomed before him, blackened windows like empty eye sockets. Rusted gates creaked in the wind. The main building's brick walls were cracked, ivy snaking up to the roof. Ethan pulled out his camera and recorder, stepping cautiously inside. The air smelled of mold, decay, and something metallic like dried blood. The floorboards groaned beneath his weight. Sunlight barely penetrated the grime-streaked windows. Just old wood, he muttered. Just wind. At first, it was silent, apart from his own breathing. But then he heard it, a faint whisper, so soft he thought it might be the wind. Leave. Ethan froze. His rational mind fought it. There's no one here. Just echoes. He pressed on. The asylum stretched out like a labyrinth. Corridors twisted in impossible angles. Doors hung on broken hinges, and graffiti covered the walls. Help me. Don't listen. They are still here. By nightfall, Ethan had explored only a fraction of the place. He set up his camera in what seemed to be the main hall. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the dim light. That's when he first heard the screams. High-pitched, terrified, echoing down the hallways. He spun around, expecting to see someone, anyone. But there was nothing. Just the empty asylum, doors swinging in the draft. It's an old building, acoustics. It's nothing more, he told himself. He replayed the audio later. The screams were real, clear, human, and underneath, almost too faint to hear, was something else. Whispers, coaxing, beckoning. The next morning, Ethan returned with a plan. Investigate patient records, map the building, and record everything. But as soon as he crossed the threshold, he noticed something new. The walls themselves seemed to breathe. The paint peeled as if it were alive, revealing scratches and marks that weren't there before. He passed the old electroshock therapy room. The screams started again, sharp, stabbing, full of pain and terror. The walls vibrated as if the screams were imprinted, playing themselves back to anyone who listened. Ethan's recorder picked it all up, and yet he could feel it in his chest, in his bones. Like the asylum's pain had become physical. Hours passed, tore, maybe minutes. Time felt wrong. Every corridor looked the same. Every door led to the same hall he'd just left. And then he realized he wasn't alone. Footsteps, soft but deliberate, echoed behind him. Yet the sound followed him, matching his pace. Faster, slower, pausing when he paused. Ethan's heart pounded. Rational thoughts slipped. "It's just the building," he repeated. But even he knew it was a lie. In the children's ward, he found small beds, still rusted in place, and toys, blackened and rotten. And then, writing on the wall in fresh, red scratches, "You can't leave." Panic gripped him. He ran. The asylum twisted around him, hallways bending, doors vanishing, stairs collapsing into darkness. The walls whispered his name, soft at first, then louder. "Ethan, come, stay." He stumbled into the basement, flashlight shaking. Rusted pipes dripped water, forming pools on the concrete floor. Shadows moved in the corners, too quick, too fluid to be natural. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps, and then he saw them. Figures patients from decades past, pale, hollow-eyed, their mouths frozen in silent screams. They drifted through the walls, following him, their eyes empty but focused. One reached out, a skeletal hand through the plaster, nearly touching his shoulder. Ethan bolted. The exit seemed impossibly far. He ran down endless corridors, the walls bending, the ceilings stretching into black nothingness. The whispers followed, now many voices, overlapping, chanting, "Stay, forever, stay." He stumbled into what appeared to be the main hall. The floorboards cracked under his weight. The chandeliers, though covered in dust, rattled as if something unseen swung them. And in the center of the room stood a figure, a shadow darker than the night, taller than any man. Its face was hidden, but Ethan could feel its gaze drilling into him. "You shouldn't have come," it said, voice echoing as if from every corner at once. "This place remembers, it hungers, and now it wants you." Ethan tried to scream. The sound was caught in his throat. He ran for the stairs, but they stretched endlessly upward. He ran down corridors that had no doors, no windows, only the suffocating whispers of the asylum itself. In the operating theater, he finally understood. The walls weren't just playing screams. They were alive with memory. Every cry, every fear, every death had seeped into the plaster and brick. And now, the asylum was hunting him, replaying all of its horrors to break him, to claim him. The shadow approached, and the whispers became unbearable. They told him everything. The patient's deaths, the doctor's sins, the screams of the abandoned, a cacophony of pain. Ethan's mind threatened to shatter. And then he ran blindly, crashing through doors, sliding down railings, until he emerged into the night. The cool air hit him like a slap. He looked back. The asylum sat silent and dark, windows empty, as if it had never been alive at all. But Ethan knew better. He could hear it still, in the quiet streets, in the rustling trees, in the wind that whispered through the town. The asylum remembered him. It was patient, was hungry, and one day it would call him back. Ethan never wrote about Hollow Ridge Asylum. No newspaper, no article, nothing. He couldn't. Because when he tried, the wall's whispers returned, shaping the words into impossible sentences, twisting his thoughts, making him relive the horrors he had witnessed. The asylum was always listening, always waiting. Spend some nights when the fog rolls in thick over the town. If you stand close enough to the old gates, you can hear it softly, almost politely at first. Ethan, come back. The walls remember. Story 7. Man in apartment 6B. Elliot Granger had lived in the Crowford building for 3 years. And in that time, he had learned one thing about city life. Some noises are best ignored. The hum of refrigerators, the creak of old plumbing, the occasional thump from upstairs, it all became part of the soundtrack, okay? But the noises from apartment 6B were different. It started small, a scrape, like someone dragging a chair across the floor, late at night. Elliot lived in 5A, directly below the mysterious 6B. At first, he assumed a new tenant had moved in. But after asking the building manager, Mrs. Peabody, a thin woman with nervous hands and a perpetual frown, he was met with a strange look. 6B, there's number 6B, she said, tapping her clipboard. Never has been. Elliot laughed it off. Maybe the numbering was off. Maybe it had been a maintenance mistake. But that night, the noises started again. Heavy steps, pacing, a door opening and closing, and the faint sound of someone whispering. Curiosity gnawed at him. He tried to ignore it, telling himself city buildings are full of strange echoes. Curiosity has a habit of turning into obsession. One night, he waited until the hallway was silent, then walked toward the non-existent apartment. He stopped at where the door should have been. There was a panel of wall, plain, unmarked, yet he could hear it. The scraping, the pacing, the whispers. He pressed his ear to the wall. Elliot, a voice hissed, soft, low, and terrifyingly intimate. His name? He stumbled back, heart hammering. No one should know his name. Not from behind a wall, not from an apartment that didn't exist. Sleep became impossible. Every night, he would lie in bed, listening to the wall, tracing the whispers with his mind. Sometimes he swore he heard footsteps in his own apartment, circling his bed, pausing, moving away. Elliot began investigating. Combed through the building's blueprints, old rent records, anything that could tell him if 6B ever existed. Nothing. No record. No mention. Nothing. Yet the sounds persisted. Every night. Same pattern. Pacing. Whispering. Soft laughter. One night, emboldened by frustration and fear, he brought a tape recorder and set it outside the wall. Hours later, he played it back. There was no static. No noise, except his own name, drawn out, deliberate, spoken in a voice that sounded like it had been inside his head all along. He called Mrs. Peabody. "You're hiding something?" he accused. "Someone's in that apartment." She shook her head, eyes wide. "You shouldn't go looking. Some things, they shouldn't be found." Her warning only made him more determined. Elliot tried reasoning. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone was living illegally, somehow, between walls. But the pattern of the noises, the intelligence in the whispers, it was too precise. The occupant knew things, his routines, his fears, even secrets he had never shared with anyone. And then came the dreams. He dreamed of 6B, a door appearing in the hallway, glowing faintly, inviting him in. Behind it, the world was wrong. Shadows moved against the laws of physics. Faces appeared in the walls. Voice whispered, "Come in. See what I see?" He woke, drenched in sweat, heart racing, and for days afterward, the apartment haunted him. Every shadow in his own apartment seemed alive. Every reflective surface, the mirror in the bathroom, the glass in the window showed flickers of movement behind him. One night, he could take it no longer. Armed with a crowbar and a flashlight, he tore into the wall where 6B should have been. The plaster crumbled, revealing nothing. Just bricks, old pipes, the emptiness of the building's core. And yet, the noises continued. Panic set in. Elliot began to suspect the truth. The man in 6B wasn't just a person. He was something else, something that existed between the walls of reality, feeding off fear, knowledge, attention. And he had chosen Elliot. The next night, Elliot left the door to his own apartment open, hoping, somehow, to confront the entity. He heard it immediately, pacing outside his door, slower this time, deliberate. He stepped into the hallway, flashlight trembling, crowbar raised. The shadow was there, but it wasn't fully formed, more like darkness given shape, edges shimmering as if reality itself couldn't contain it. "You know me," it said, voice layered everywhere at once. "I know you. You listen, you look, and now you belong." Elliot swung the crowbar. It passed through the shadow, hitting nothing. The shape laughed, a sound that reverberated through his chest, through his bones. The hallway seemed to stretch, elongate, the walls bending, folding impossibly around him. He ran. The shadow followed, gliding, twisting through the hallways in ways that defied reason. He stumbled into the stairwell, heart hammering, breath ragged. Each step felt heavier, as if the building itself resisted his escape. At the lobby, Mrs. Peabody appeared, though she hadn't been there before. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. "It doesn't live in the apartment. It is the apartment. Or the building, or the space between." Elliot froze. What? What is it? It shouldn't exist. But it does. And it wants attention, curiosity, fear. She gestured toward the stairwell. "You've given it both." The whisper came again, closer, inside his mind now. "Elliot, come. See?" Desperation clawed at him. He fled into the night, ignoring the traffic, the neon lights, the city sounds. Behind him, the building loomed, windows dark, but somehow alive. He could feel the gaze of 6B, following, patient, eternal. In the following weeks, Elliot moved to a new city, changed his number, avoided apartments with high floors. Yet every reflective surface, mirrors, even shiny spoons, sometimes flickered. Sometimes he heard it. Soft, deliberate, intimate. "Elliot, come back. Apartment 6B. He realized, with horror, that the man in 6B didn't belong to a floor, or a building, or even a city. It belonged to him now, and as long as he existed, so would it, patient, watching, waiting. Some nights, in quiet moments, he swears he can hear its footsteps, pacing just beyond his walls, whispering secrets only he knows. Apartment 6B doesn't need a door, a plan, or a number. It doesn't need to exist on paper. It exists in curiosity, in fear, in the spaces between reality. And it has found its next visitor. Elliot will never live alone again. The first time the carnival came to Derry Hollow, the town was quiet and unsuspecting. A dusty trail of trailers, colorful tents, and twinkling lights appeared overnight at the edge of the old fairground. The sign swinging above the entrance read simply, "Carnival of Wonders tonight only." No one knew where it had come from. No posters, no announcements, just the lights and the smell of popcorn and caramel that drifted on the night air. Eli, Ruby, and Tommy were the first to notice something strange. Kids tend to notice things adults ignore. The performers didn't look quite right. Their smiles were too wide, their eyes too dark, and their movements jerky, unnatural, like marionettes. "Creepy clowns," Tommy whispered, gripping Ruby's hand. "They're just performers," Ruby said, trying to sound brave. "It's a carnival. It's what they do." Eli, older and more cautious, shook his head. "Something's wrong. Get that woman spinning plates, okay? Her head moves before she does." They watched from the edge of the tents, hearts pounding, purely like it always does. That night, townsfolk began vanishing. First, old Mr. Henderson, who had walked out for a late smoke. Then Mrs. Walsh, returning from her grocery run. No screams, no signs of struggle. Only mirrors left behind in the carnival tents, their surfaces fogged and warped, reflecting something else. The mirrors didn't show the missing people. Instead, they showed twisted versions, shadows of themselves, mouths stretched to wide, eyes to bright, expressions of terror frozen forever. The kids discovered it accidentally, hiding behind a tent to avoid the performers. Ruby, peeking inside, gasped, That's Mr. Henderson." Eli studied the mirror. "It's not him. It's something else, something made from him." They ran home, hearts pounding, but sleep brought nightmares. In every dream, the mirrors called to them, whispering their names, showing their faces, twisted, screaming. The next day, they tried to tell adults. But every attempt was met with a strange fog over the carnival grounds. People who entered the tents didn't see anything unusual. Only the kids noticed the missing townsfolk. Only they saw the mirrors, their warped images, their whispers, torment. They returned to the carnival at night, armed with flashlights and courage only children possess. Inside the main tent, the mirrors stretched from floor to ceiling, angled like a funhouse, but impossibly tall. The reflections shimmered unnaturally. In the center stood the ringmaster man, dressed in crimson, tall and thin, with eyes black as tar. "Welcome, children," he said, voice smooth and echoing. "You've come to play, haven't you?" Ruby swallowed. "Where are the people?" He smiled. "They're here, with us, waiting, forever." Suddenly, the mirrors rippled like water. Figures reached out, twisted, screaming reflections of the townsfolk, their hands pressed against the glass, mouths opening in silent pleas. Eli's stomach turned. "They're trapped," he whispered. "Yes," the ringmaster said, "and soon we'll join them." The kids tried to run, but the mirrors shifted, closing the paths they took. The performers appeared, not human, not entirely, elongated, eyes glowing, skin pale and waxen. They moved silently, surrounding the children. Eli remembered an old book in the town library, tales of a traveling carnival cursed centuries ago, feeding on townsfolk, keeping them as shadows and mirrors. He grabbed a shard of broken glass from the floor. "We need to break the mirrors," he shouted. Ruby and Tommy joined in. They smashed one, then another. Cracks ran across the mirrored surfaces like lightning. The trapped reflections screamed in silence, stretching, twisting. The glass vibrated under their hands. The ringmaster shrieked, "No, you cannot undo what has begun." Shards fell, and with each broken piece, the mirror's hold weakened. The shadows dissolved into smoke, rising and vanishing into the night. The performers screamed, shapes flickering like candle flames in wind. Finally, the largest mirror remained, the one in the center. Inside, they saw the ringmaster's own reflection, perfectly human, smiling. Eli realized the truth. Destroy this mirror, and the carnival would vanish, but they would be in danger too. Ruby looked at him, terrified. "We have to do it." Eli nodded. With a single motion, he threw the largest shard into the mirror. Its glass exploded outward in a blast of light, shattering into hundreds of tiny pieces. The ringmaster's scream filled the tent, echoing off walls that seemed to stretch forever. When the light faded, the carnival was gone. The fairground was empty. Only the cool night air remained, and the faint smell of popcorn, sweet and bitter. The children ran home, exhausted but alive. The town slowly realized the missing were returning, dazed and silent, as if waking from a dream. Not one remembered the carnival except for Eli, Ruby, and Tommy. Even years later, they remembered the whispers, the twisted mirrors, and the feeling of black eyes watching from every reflection. Some nights, when the moon is thin and silver, Eli swears he can hear soft music in the distance, carousel tunes drifting on the wind. He knows, without knowing how, that the Carnival of Shadows waits, patient, hungry, always searching for its next town. And if you're not careful, it might find you first.